Hi you guys, welcome back to Sewing with Baby Lock Soprano, the series. Thank you for being extremely patient while it took me so long to get back to this series. I appreciate you and I have a lot lined up for you. For those of you who are new here, visiting for the first time, I'm Anita with Anita by Design, and here on my channel you will find step-by-step, very detailed sew-alongs and tutorials to help you with your sewing projects. Here in this series, Sewing with Baby Lock Soprano, I'm talking all about the Baby Lock Soprano sewing machine and showing you how to use it, everything that comes with it. You can go and look back at some of the other videos in the series, and I will link up above so that you can check that out, and I will also link in the description box below so that you can see all of the videos that I've recorded so far in the series. And remember, there are a lot more coming. Now, today in episode number 9, I will be showing you how to sew an overcast stitch to finish off the raw edges of your projects with the Baby Lock Soprano. So if you don't have a serger, it's okay. You can actually finish your raw edges with the Soprano. Let's get started. To find all of the stitches that come with the machine, we're going to refer to the instruction and reference guide. Beginning on page B44, is a stitch setting chart. On page B45 is where you will find all of the overcasting stitches. Let's take a look first at the heading for the chart. Here you find all of the information that you need for the different stitches. In column number 1 is the stitch column that gives you an illustration of all of the different stitches. The next 2 columns tell you the stitch number, and it's based on your machine model. So you have the different machine models listed here, and then you will just choose the stitch number based on your model. Then the next column is the stitch name. After that, you get the presser foot. So this column tells you exactly which presser foot to use for the stitch that you select. After that is the applications column, and this gives an explanation of what the stitch is and what type of fabric they're suggesting you use for the stitch. The next column is the stitch width column, and then the stitch length column. These are the automatic settings that come when you select the stitch. The next column tells you whether or not it's okay to use a twin needle. Then the next column tells you whether or not your stitch will come with a reverse stitch or a reinforcement stitch. Finally, the last column tells you whether or not it's okay to use a walking foot. Back to the reverse and reinforcement stitch column. If you want a back stitch or reinforcement stitch at the beginning and end of your stitches, then you're going to need to engage the automatic reverse reinforcement stitch button on the operations panel. If you don't engage that button, then you're going to have to press the reverse or reinforcement stitch button at the beginning and end of each stitch. Now let's take a look at some of the overcasting stitches. And if you will notice, it starts at number 15 and goes all the way down to number 23. So there are quite a few. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 overcasting stitches that come with the machine. But if you will notice, if you take a look in the presser foot column, there are 3 that use presser foot G, and then the remainder use presser foot J. In the applications column, the 3 that use the presser foot G are for woven fabrics, and then all the rest are for stretch fabrics. So if you're sewing a project with a knit fabric, then you will choose one of these overcasting stitches for stretch fabrics. Let's take a look at number 15, and I would choose number 15 from this column because this is my machine model here, and then this is the stitch that I will get. It's an overcasting stitch. I will use presser foot G, and this stitch is for reinforcing light and medium weight fabrics. These are the machine settings that I will get, and I don't need to bother those. I cannot use a twin needle, and I will get a reinforcement stitch if I engage the automatic reverse and reinforcement stitch button on the operations panel. If not, I can actually manually insert a reinforcement stitch at the beginning and end of my stitch by pressing the button. and I cannot use a walking foot. So we're going to go ahead and practice some of these stitches. I think we'll practice 2 with woven fabric. We'll do 1 with a lightweight fabric and then another one with a heavyweight fabric, and then we'll practice 1 with a knit fabric. For the first round of practice, we're going to use a lightweight woven fabric. I've already sewn the 2 layers together with a straight stitch. Now we're going to choose the stitch. You'll notice that this first button is already highlighted. We need to use a utility stitch, so we're going to press the second button here. Then we're going to choose stitch number 15. And then you'll notice here on the screen that stitch number 15 has been chosen. We're in utility stitch mode, and this is the pattern that we're going to be sewing. These are the automatic settings that come with that particular stitch. The next thing we need to do is engage the automatic reinforcement button, which is this one. And by engaging that button, the machine will sew in a reinforcement stitch at the beginning and end of our stitch. Now let's take a look at the presser foot. This is presser foot G, and what you will notice about this foot is that there is an opening right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to line up the fabric right along the left side of this guide on the right. If we look at it from the back, there's the opening, and the fabric will be lined up right against the edge of the guide. So let's go ahead and insert the foot. Then we're going to take our fabric and we're going to line it up, again, right along the edge of this guide. And then we will just begin to sew. Then we're going to press the reinforcement button. This is the reinforcement button, and when we press this button, it will automatically sew in the reinforcement stitch. If we were sewing a reverse stitch, then we would press this button. Let's press the reinforcement button. And that's it. Let's take a look at the stitch. There you have a perfect overcast stitch sewn on your Soprano sewing machine. For the next stitch, we're going to practice on a heavyweight woven fabric, and I've chosen stitch number 16 using the same procedure that I showed you earlier. So let's go ahead and insert our fabric right along the edge of that guide. And begin. Reinforcement. Let's take a look. And this is our reinforcement or our overcast stitch on a heavyweight denim fabric. Next, we're going to practice the overcasting stitch on knit fabric. And this is a medium weight knit. Therefore, I've chosen stitch number 19, which is the one that is recommended for reinforcing medium stretch fabric. We're going to use foot J, which is the zigzag foot. It's also the all-purpose foot and the one that comes attached to your machine when you receive your Soprano. So let's install the J foot. And when you are lining up your fabric with the zigzag foot for an overcast stitch, you're going to need to line it up to where the needle, when it strikes over to the right, that it's striking right off the edge of that fabric. So what you're going to have to do is you're really going to need to practice with a piece of scrap fabric to find out where that needle strikes and where you need to line up your fabric on your needle plate to keep it in line. So let's go ahead and line it up. I've already practiced ahead of time. Another thing is you're going to have to really take your time and just be careful as you're feeding the fabric through. You may have to play around with the tension, the presser foot tension, to make sure that the fabric feeds through freely and that it's not pulling over to the left side, which is one of the issues that I ran into when I was practicing. So let's go ahead and sew. Okay, so here's what we have, and you will notice the difference already, that the stitch was perfect in the beginning and then it veered off to the right and got narrower and narrower and narrower, and by the time I got to the end it was running off the fabric. That's because I was not lined up on the mark on my needle plate the entire length of the stitch, and that's what I was talking about when you need to make sure that you're practicing, or well, yes, practicing, but making sure that you're playing around with the tension before you sew your stitch to make sure that your fabric is not pulling off to the left, which is exactly what happened here. And I wanted to show you this so that you can know what will happen if you don't have the correct tension on your machine. So depending on the thickness of your fabric, then you will probably have to adjust the presser foot tension. Now I want to show you how to correct this by changing the presser foot tension on your machine. That way, based on the thickness of the fabric that you're using, you can practice beforehand and get the correct tension before you sew in your overcast stitch. To change the presser foot pressure on the machine, we're going to go to the settings page, which is this icon. So we're going to press the button. And you will notice we are on page 1 and there are 9 pages. To advance to page 5, we need to press the plus sign here until we get to 5. Now that we're on page 5, you will see the presser foot pressure line at the very top, and it's set to a 3. We're going to take that all the way down to a 1 by pressing the minus sign here. By taking it down to a 1, we're releasing some of the pressure that the presser foot will place on the fabric. Then we will press OK to lock it in. And now we're back to our screen that shows us the stitch we're using. Now let's go and redo that seam. Okay, fabric is all lined up. Let's try this again. Let's take a look, and that is much better. We have a nice even overcast stitch from beginning to end, and that's the front. There's the back. So there you have it. Make sure your presser foot tension is set properly for the type of fabric that you're using. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below. I also welcome comments and questions, and if you'd like to see more and you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I invite you to subscribe, but make sure that you hit that little bell to the right of the subscribe button so that when episode 10 comes out and other sew-alongs and tutorials, then you will be notified. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Bye-bye.